Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Where's the Line, where we explore the gray areas of life. I am here with my lovely co host, Jane Liu, and my name is Sabrina Freehoff. Jane, how are you?
Hello, hello. I'm good. New year, new me. We are recording this in a new year, and January is also my birthday month. So it is very exciting for me because I'm researching which restaurant I'm gonna have my birthday dinner at. So, a
Mhm.
lot of exciting things happening in my life right now. Serena, how are you doing?
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, we are in a new year, 2024. I call this the year of spontaneous dreams.
Oh,
So we'll see. I have a few trips coming up that I'm very excited about. And yeah, just really open to whatever new opportunities and possibilities this year brings. So
good for you. Good for you. We all need a little spontaneous moments in our lives, don't we?
absolutely, yeah. Yeah, well, and with that, I'm so delighted we have another very special guest on. And today we're going to be talking about return to office. So, how to really set the boundaries between we were at home for a long time, right? And then companies told us, we want you back one day, then we want you back 2 days. And then all of a sudden you have to be back Monday through Thursday and all the challenges that come with that and how to navigate that. And I'm so delighted to have Joy Carter on, who is one of my former colleagues and now friend. So blessed to have her on. And Joy actually now has her own coaching and career business. And I can't think of a better suited person for this topic. And so, Joy, welcome to Where's the Line? If you could introduce yourself and share a little bit more about your background and your journey.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, to both Jane and Sabrina, thank you guys for having me on. My name is Joy Karcher, and I live in the great state of Texas, for those that are interested in knowing where I reside. Um, and my background is all talent acquisition. And when I say all talent acquisition, it is all recruiting, all sourcing, everything. I had moved to New York years ago when I first graduated from college to become a performer. And as I was doing that, I went, oh, I need to make some money so I can pay bills. And so I started temping back in the day. And the staffing firm I worked for said, hey, have you thought about doing what we do to make a living? And I thought, no. And so I started doing that, and the rest is history. And we're now 28 years later. I can't even believe I'm saying that, 28 years later. That's crazy town. 28 years later, I am still very passionate about this work, and I'm super excited about where we're headed into 2024. I love the spontaneity thing for you, Sabrina, this year. What was it?
Dreams, yeah.
Spontaneous dreams. I love that, by the way. I still need to pick my word for 2024. I still haven't done that yet. And I actually may just pick a phrase. I'm super excited to be here, and I'm super excited to talk about return to work return to office, because I think it's going to be it's the new black dress of a topic for this year, for sure.
It very much is. And I myself am navigating through this return to office as well. Before we even get into any like a deeper topic, what's been your general observation with return to office throughout? Let's start with 2023, so last year, and then what has been your observation of people's sentiment and reaction to returning to the office?
So I think I'll speak in general terms first, and then I can speak more specific to the industry that I specialize in, which is the recruiting and sourcing industry. But in general, it has truly been a very large psychological play, right? Like, people have had a very visceral reaction. It hasn't been positive. Um, what I think is really interesting is there are folks that are very happy about going back to the office. And but the majority is not thrilled about it. We have a lot of folks that have identified that, like working moms like myself, we may have a working spouse. It is fantastic to be able to work from home. And and it is a luxury item. But last year, I think last year it was we saw little sprinkles of larger companies, by the way,
Hmm.
saying, hey, we're going to start to return to office. And it was, we're going to have phased approaches and all, large companies rolled out, playbooks about how we're going to do this. And because when we went to work from home, there was no transition. It was, we're in a pandemic. We're now all going, you cannot come into office and you got to work from home. And so it was like flipping a switch, like electricity switch. We just went, whoop, we're just going to turn it off and okay, we're home. And then now it's these playbooks and getting people back in, and it's all psychological. It's a psychological and behavioral component to this. And I think that is without getting too deep into the solution here of this discussion yet, but that's the missing piece to the puzzle where people are not addressing it. They're not addressing the psychological impact that COVID had on people. They're not addressing the behavioral aspect. They're just saying, we're going to do a phased approach because we have commercial assets that we got to pay for.
Right.
And because we're paying for these commercial assets, you are a part of this organization and we're writing your paycheck. We need you back in that commercial asset. Right. And so there's just a lot of direct impact to people's bottom line versus thinking about the human element. And I get it. Like it's a hard thing to do because it's an intangible, not a tangible. The tangible is the commercial asset, the finances. That
Hmm.
intangible aspect is it's the feeling. It's the feelings of it. And we are now going to have to unwind all of this behavior that we've been conditioned to accept because we have been in a work from home capacity. We are going to have to unwind it. And that unwinding, we're not going to be able to flip the switch like we did when we went into the pandemic. And I just speaking about the industry that I support, which is the recruiting and the sourcing space, what I think is really, really interesting is last year, there were still companies that were hiring remote,
Hmm.
but because of the dynamic of how much supply and demand was imbalanced last year, it was all of a sudden companies, and this is the sad, harsh reality, is companies said, oh, there's a lot of supply and I can
Hmm.
lower the price point of what I used to pay for all this supply. Oh, and by the way, I could probably get them back into my office. So you have a lot of people that are applying to roles that are so out of whack of their qualifications, whether it's overqualified or underqualified.
Yeah. And you talked a lot about like the different waves and the transitional experience that a lot of companies are trying to create. And I
Yeah.
think that's where I probably am. Like we've been using hybrid strategy as kind of the term, but essentially it's like come back to work, 2 times a week or something, right? And my
Yeah.
husband, they talked about 3 times a week. And like I know different companies has different requirements, but
Yeah.
ultimately that's like the hybrid strategy. You still have folks like, for example, Sabrina, right, who is fully remote, and there are pros and cons of being fully remote. You mentioned like the
Yeah.
flexibility, the
Yeah.
caretaking, and just in general being able to spend more time with family or doing whatever you want to do. But then you may lack the opportunities to build in-person relationships or ERGs, right? There's a lot of pros and cons, but as we kind of get into some of that pros and cons, um, even just would love to hear your perspective. Like, how are people navigating this, right? Like, it is what it is. Some companies are
Mhm.
requiring people to go back. So, like, I don't necessarily have a choice unless I leave my company. How are people navigating through this?
For us, we have found that we had to sit down and say, okay, what's the schedule this week? And by the way, we used to do this pre-pandemic, right? We used to sit
Mm.
down at the beginning, like on Sundays before the week started, and said, okay, you're going to take, Ryan to this, and okay, I'll take Ryan to that, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And I have a doctor's appointment. So right. So you just kind of, you coordinate. And again, we've lost potentially some of it has been we've lost that ability to do that because we've been so wired and so conditioned to be like we have so much flexibility, we can go do whatever we want whenever we want. So I would just say communication is key.
Mm.
That's, at least for me personally, that's what I have seen work for me and my husband. I will say as well, with other folks that I know that they both work and both have to go back to the office.
Mhm.
It's truly getting to a place of understanding that it's also okay, and this is something I've seen some folks do, it's also okay to ask your employer for a little bit of flexibility. And when I say little bit of flexibility, I truly believe that it's okay to ask for what you need. It's a need and a want are different things, as I think we all know, right? I
Mhm.
need to eat and drink water. I want to eat chocolate and drink coffee. Okay.
Mhm.
So
Right.
like, I think, yeah, I mean, right. Like we understand that there's a difference between a want and a need. And so when you have that conversation with your employer, it's less about, I want to do this. It's, I need to do this in order to balance my family, right? Balance my family needs. Now, that doesn't sound like I can only work X days. I can only, right? When you start putting demands on your employer, that's not the type of communication conversation that I would recommend. And certainly as a leader, I would not receive that well. What I would receive in a better manner is somebody coming to me and saying, because we're now going into this model and I'm having to adjust things on my end, which is, it is what it just Jane, it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
um I now am in a position to have a little bit better understanding as to what my schedule here is going to be. Because I don't know about y'all, but when I was going into an office, did you guys ever get the at like 3:30, 4 o'clock, ooh, can we have a quick meeting? Like just a super quick meeting. And then that quick meeting turns into 2 hours and you're like, holy blah. Like I'm now going to be stuck in traffic because I used to work and live in California and I used to go in office and it'd be like, it's going to take me now 2 hours to get home. Right.
Mhm.
So just setting those expectations, and they're scary. They're scary, setting expectations, but doing it in a way that is more around a balanced communication style versus dictating. And then in addition to that, truly being an active listener to what your employer is asking. So, and that's an art, by the way, the art of active listening. I have said this for years, which is, and it took me a long time to understand this, which is there is a difference between listening to respond and listening to reflect. The listening to respond is, I'm already thinking 5 sentences ahead of what you've already said because I want to respond to what you said, versus listening to reflect. And maybe I need to ask you some validating questions, which is in this return to office. If there's a scenario in which all of a sudden the light switch feels like it got turned on and you had no understanding as to what was going to be happening, that is a listen to reflect, and meaning ask some questions. Hey, how can I transition back to the office in an effective way? So I make sure I do my job for what because you're paying me my paycheck, right?
Mhm.
How can I transition back? And if there's not a plan, maybe help your company come up with a plan to transition back. I think that take a little bit more active role instead of taking that passive backseat and saying, all right, it is what it is. If you don't like
Yeah.
it, if you don't like it, speak up. But speak up in a way that it's a tangible solution, not why do we have to go back to the office? Because by the way, I mean, everybody says, why do we have to do it? We
Yeah.
figured out how to work from home for years and years and years. Listen, yes, we did. But if you don't write your paycheck, you don't dictate that. And if you don't have another solution to how it needs to be done, what you're doing is adding gasoline to a fire. That's it.
I really like how you frame that. It's almost like starting with that shared goal in mind, right?
Yeah.
You want to be successful, but you also want your employer to be successful. So
Yeah.
having that goal in mind and having a constructive conversation. And I think what you touched on is so critical because or I think as women, right, we're maybe less inclined to ask for things, right, to begin with. And then even studies have shown in minorities may ask less for that, right? What is it that we need? Not what we want, but what is it that we truly need, and setting your boundaries. And I think this has been especially hard because it's such an employer-led market. At least it feels like it
Uh-huh.
now, right? Where we're just numbers. And so, but I like knowing your worth and like really working towards I want to be successful and I want to make our company successful. These are the sort of parameters that would help me. So I really like how you frame that. Let's talk a little bit more about the benefits of returning to work for someone having the choice to go back to the office or not.
Yeah, and for me at least, it's one of those scenarios and situations in which everybody is different. And I think what we have a tendency to do as humans is we tend to categorize people in groups and say, well, all women must be struggling, all singles must be struggling, all this must be struggling. And that's not true. I think everybody's circumstances are different. And I do see, because I have seen it firsthand, the benefits of going back to an office. Maybe not 5 days a week, but I have seen where it's incredibly beneficial and you can knock things out wicked fast. What is the primary purpose of going back into office? Is it, and I go back to that idea of, is it to justify your commercial asset that you got to pay for? And so you got to get the butts in the seats? Or is the customer that you are supporting need you in office because things can get accomplished so much more quickly? A great example of that is year-end headcount planning, right? In talent acquisition, we start doing headcount planning around fourth quarter-ish going into first quarter. And it doesn't matter what your annual cycle looks like. That fourth quarter time is really great for planning. I can tell you, I get so much more done in person doing that headcount planning because you can knock things out and you can have conversations so fast about, well, what about this? What if how about, oh, but wait, don't you remember, right? Those like instant conversations that are solution oriented versus doing something like this where we're on video, which is great. And thank God for technology, but I can't see all of your body language. And sometimes when you're on video, the other thing that we can't do a lot of times is we can't give those verbal cues back. I was raised in the church, and you guys will hear me do this quite often throughout our conversation is that you'll say something like, like I just like, but I like that, right? Like I enjoy being able to hear the verbal feedback of, am I on track, off track? And sometimes you can't get that when you're on video. At what point do you have a conversation with your employer that says, listen, what's my primary purpose of being in the office? Is it just so you can see the whites of my eyes? Because I don't interact with anybody, right? And then just get rigorously honest with your employees, which is, we have to have you here because we have this space and we have to validate keeping the space.
Yeah.
I don't understand why and maybe I'm just making this too simple, but I just don't understand why people are scared of that direct conversation. The other pro too is think about the behavioral aspect, right? We have all been conditioned to being at home, masked, by ourselves. So and by the way, as a human being, we are not designed to be by ourselves. That was not how the universe, and I don't care what you believe in, but truly that is not how the universe designed us to be. We're social. Now, whether that's you're social with one person or 1,000 people, that's okay, but we're social. And there is a benefit to that. If a company were to do it right, they would do things like, hey, we're going to have a phased approach. We're going to come back into office and we are going to, every month, we're just going to come in and we're just going to have an opportunity just to catch up with everybody. Right. So it's more like, oh, okay, so that's the purpose of why we're coming in. Right. And then the next, right. And then you just kind of build on that and you have topics and things of that nature.
When we were initially returning to work, I was like, oh, what's the purpose of going there? We can just chat, right? Now I have noticed a couple instances where I can just walk up to their desk and quickly validate, gut check something or validate a quick idea. And to your point, being able to see their movements, being able to see them like nod and react and have some sort of like immediate reaction has been very helpful. Whereas I've noticed, like even today, with the exact same person that I had previously had this gut check experience in the office, today I had something where I needed to go validate with the exact same person. I drafted the ping And it took me a lot of time to draft, like,
Mm.
here's my initial pros and cons of this thing that I want to gut. And like, I'm having to pretty much write an entire email just to validate something that we can quickly talk through live. So that has been actually one very clear example where I've like caught myself. There truly is a different type of productivity in the office. So, like I'm still not the biggest supporter of returning to office, I will admit, but there are certainly a couple things that I have noticed that's been very valuable for me.
Yeah, it's great to hear both of you share. I want to add a personal example and then some research that I've recently been reading on as it pertains to return to office. I can agree with both of you in terms of like, so I'm fully remote. I've been fully remote for 4 years. I've got it down to a T. I know my schedule. I'm very diligent, and I also don't have a distraction of a family, right? So I'm at home, single, and I can like really focus. But Jane, what one thing you mentioned in terms of like drafting the Slack sometimes takes more time than just going up to someone, and that really became quite apparent to me when I was in the office. Like even I had the pleasure to meet Joy in San Francisco at one of our offsites, and just like having that in person, the energy, it was just so beautiful that I could have never had over Zoom, right? And then just being there, I don't think I was productive because I was just having so many chit chats, but just that building the connections and relationships was invaluable. And that time together was more valuable than the entire half a year before then that I was just on Zoom. I recently, so there's this company called Workalytics. They're doing incredible studies about just work behavior, and now return to office. And their studies have shown actually that interestingly, the time spent in meetings has gone up drastically from before to now to return to office, mainly because we all had these meetings set up on our calendars when the pandemic hit, right? Like, oh, check-ins, coffee check-in here, coffee there. And many of
Mhm.
them, those meetings may not have been taken off after we returned to office. So we had all these meetings from the pandemic. And now on top of that, we have in-office meetings and catch up. So it was really interesting to see that. So, which brings me to some of the challenges. Like we talked about the benefits, but pivoting over to the challenges, um, we've seen a few, right? Like commute is one. During the pandemic, a lot of people moved away from the office location, right, into maybe a cheaper location. So now the commute is at play. And then women as caretakers, right? Like now that they return to office, they may need to leave the office to take care and take care of their kids. But what other challenges, Joy, have you observed with the return to office?
The I go back to the idea of supply and demand. And the commute is this ties into the commute, but it's more around people have moved to locations where there are not jobs that are plentiful right now, right? And they move there for a better cost of living for themselves.
Mhm.
And now, throughout last year, with all of the layoffs that just hit all at once, um, it's really going to be challenging for those individuals because they're going to have to relocate. I shouldn't say have to. They might have to relocate in order to land a full-time job.
Mhm.
Um, and they're not, some of them say, gosh, you know what, I can't move back to these major cities because I am taking care of maybe a parent, right? Or maybe they have now been put in a position to be, a full-time caretaker for someone outside of their family. Like, who knows? We don't, again, everybody's circumstances are different. So I think that'll be a big challenge is I think relocation. This is what's crazy. Okay. So this is what's crazy is think about, okay, so all these people are in all these different locations, right? And they don't have access maybe to all these jobs. And they say, okay, I have to relocate. So you have a candidate that's like, yep, okay, I'm willing to relocate. And now we have companies that go, okay, yeah, we'll relocate people. The
Mhm.
amount of money that they are spending on relocation versus, hey, you know what? Why don't we actually just have you work from home, but every other month we'll fly you into the office and stay for a week, meet people, have key meetings, blah, 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 and then go back. You know, gas prices are astronomical. Eating out. So let's talk about that. That's another cost, unless you're, you know, working for a big name organization that gives you food. Your grocery bill now may go up, right? So again, there's a lot of dynamics that go along with this, that I just, there are pros and cons. I love the idea of going to your mothership like every so often and seeing people and interacting with purpose versus asking somebody to go back in office full time. But that's just, you know, again, I'm also in a luxury position where I don't have to make that decision for myself. Right. So it's a lot easier. And Jana, I'd love to hear your perspective on this because it's so much easier for me to be like, I'd go back if I had to, but see, I don't.
Mm,
I don't, because I
yeah.
started my own deal and I work from home. I think the other thing too that we have just gotten so into in an unhealthy way is our devices and social media.
Mm.
And it's provided us a way to not communicate and not interact in the way that I'm telling you, we are designed to do this. This is this is how we are all wired, whether again, one-on-one or one on 1,000. But the idea of digitally detoxing, I mean, I'm sad to even have to say that, but just having more tangible conversations that are about your sphere, your family, your, you know, whatever it is. And Sabrina, for you, you know, having the opportunity to be, and I do see it as an opportunity to be single, you know, but to be single, but it's the same concept because I know, you know, I have girlfriends that are single and it's so easy to get like, all of a sudden you look up and you're like, oh my God, I've been scrolling on this thing for an hour
Okay.
versus what if you just picked up the phone and called somebody? Hey, I've been thinking about you. It does tie into that return to office because we have gotten so incredibly hardwired, and it was almost eerily scary. I don't know if that's like a phrase that it doesn't make sense, but we're going to use it. How easy it was for us to all get so hardwired over the
Mhm.
last 3 years.
True.
And I think there was a lot of fear, and fear makes us do things that we normally wouldn't do. And so now when you're coming out of this scenario and situation and companies are now saying, hey, listen, I need you to go back into office. Again, it's not lost on me that companies are looking at the bottom line. But then as a human, like how can you provide that solution to think through how is this going to impact us as people? Right. And can you be the light for what needs to happen versus, you know, being a rock and pulling them down into the water, right? And being the light means things like this, which is, gosh, maybe we just need to have more conversations about what,
Right.
Yeah.
you know, novel concept. But yeah.
As we all probably already know, like minority groups in general struggle in corporate America. Like we have to fight, extra hard to get the recognition or the promotion. Um, how has that changed during the pandemic when we were working remotely? And now that we're going back, do you anticipate this return to work or return to office would that accelerate or reduce any sort of discrimination? I can even share from my perspective, like I am in ERG groups and I got to meet my ERG colleagues in person. And it was really nice to feel that community. I feel stronger, not only connection, but just like that community experience. So I felt like that was really good. But I also imagine a potential negative could be, you know, I don't know, maybe women have to leave the workforce because they have to be the caretaker, right? Oftentimes, women by default end up being the caretaker. Does that mean more men will get promoted because they are more likely to be in the office and they can commute to the office? What's your perspective on that?
I have lots of thoughts. So let me start by saying that I will speak about my personal lived experiences as a woman. And to be very clear, I am a white woman. So with a heck of a lot of privilege. Um, so when I think about organizations that I have been a part of, that have created opportunities to hire within diverse communities. And especially during the pandemic, I was with a very large tech company during the during the time of the pandemic. And excuse me, as a part of that, what was really interesting to see was the large dynamic shift between where companies were investing in diversity and where they weren't. Company A that I worked for, will say, basically said, okay, we are going to have X number of Black African American leaders by X year. Okay, great. So now we have a North Star. That's what we're going for. And being a talent acquisition, created all these diversity strategies. And then when the pandemic hit, it went, oh my God, like we don't have to talk these people into relocating into cities where, by the way, there's hardly any Black African American people and they don't have a community. So now you go, we can meet them, we can meet people where they are, and we don't have to ask them to come into our hubs. Okay. So yay. So diversity was like, and like hiring all over the country, and it was amazing. And all of a sudden you see color in organizations that you've never seen color in, and you've seen female leaders rising the ranks, and and like all this amazing stuff. Okay. Then layoffs happen. I know I'm not saying anything you guys don't know. Layoffs happen. And as a result of layoffs, companies start to decentralize some of these initiatives that they put so much effort and attention into, because now they're looking at the bottom line. And again, I hate to say this, but rightly so. I mean, they write the paychecks, right? So they're looking at the bottom line. What really pissed me off was when I looked at all the people that were being laid off. Minority, 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 minority. I mean, I kid you not. I went, what in the world is going on? And it broke my heart. But number two, I was like, why? It's the idea of Chicken Little. Next time a company's like, oh, we gotta hire diversity, I'm like, do you really? Because I don't know if I believe them. I don't know if I believe that they're going to retain people. That to me it's less about the hiring initiatives and it's more about the retaining. So then we get into this return to office, right? So lots of people are on the market. A lot of minority people are on the market, and now companies are saying, go back in the office. Well, now the diversity is being, I don't want to say decentralized. What's the word I'm looking for? It's being, it's going away. Like companies are not, they're not talking about it as often. They're like, well, yeah, we did it. We did it. And we hired a lot of Black people and a lot of Hispanic people and a lot of females, and we did it. And we've retained some of it in our organization, but now we really just need to tighten the belt. And, that's kind of a luxury item right now. I would say if we're not in a position to meet employees where they are, you're going to run into the same problem we did 5 years ago, by the way, before George Floyd, where it was people were doing diversity, but they weren't advertising that they were. And when I say doing hiring for diverse talent, so it's gonna be a repeat. I hope this is not true, but I think this is what's gonna happen. I think it's gonna be a repeat of what we saw maybe about 8 or 10 years ago. We're gonna see a lot more white men get promoted, a heck of a lot more white men get promoted. I just would love to know if there's research out there that supports any of my gibberish that I just rattled off.
It does, yeah. I can't cite anything right now, but from what I've seen, and again, a lot of it is still sort of in flux, like pre to post comparisons, but you're definitely onto something, and it also breaks my heart, and it's disgusting, to be honest.
Yeah, it is.
And yeah, I've seen it firsthand now as well. So yeah, it's not great.
I wouldn't be surprised if in a year or two, companies all of a sudden are like, hey, we're hiring diversity now and we're making this much progress again. And this progress is due to the layoff that you just had, where a lot of people were laid off and you lost that diversity. So now you look good because all of a sudden you're hiring diversity again, but it's because you just dropped, a year or two ago. And so it just feels like a negative cycle that people can't get out of, because what are they to do?
Yeah, and it's interesting. So bringing up like statistics and things of that nature, again, I just I don't look at the last 3 years as I don't think we should use that as any type of litmus test for this was normal.
Mhm.
I just don't. I think that it's a moment in time that none of us ever truly thought we would experience. I know I didn't, right? Um, and now we're coming out of it. And as a part of coming out of it, it's like, okay, so now what? But I would love to find out companies that are actually retaining their
Mm,
diverse talent that they spent so much money
Mhm.
investing in the last three
yeah.
years. Who's doing their work to retain? Right?
Yeah.
Um, and if you are, God, let's like, and I joke about playbooks all the time, but let's make a playbook and let's like share that with all the countries, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, we talked about discrimination, which is such a huge topic, and there's so much that goes into this. But I also want to touch on like little things or little microaggressions that could also happen when it comes to returning to the office, right? Like many of the colleagues we've never met. I was we're looking at the volume of people who started after like my start date, which is like right before the pandemic, and almost like half of the company was newer than I am. So like most of these people I've never met. But even
Uh-huh.
for people that I have worked with in person, some of them may have like gained weight, lost weight, changed the way they look. They might have came out, right? And just is a different person. They might have changed their family situations, had kids,
Yeah.
divorce, whatever, right? Whatever the
Yeah.
situation may be, they're now different. So how do we go about one, me as an individual, how do I protect myself and set those boundaries with coworkers when comments like that do happen? But then also two, like me as a colleague to somebody else, how do I best shape an inclusive workplace?
That's a scary question. And let me tell you why I say that's a scary question is because I don't think that everyone is emotionally equipped to be able to handle that.
Mm,
Um, I think that we have some pretty significant opportunity to work on. I keep going back to the idea of behavioral and psychological impact of coming back to the office. And the word boundaries has been said a couple times during this conversation that we've had. And my concern with what you've just asked is that again, I just don't think everybody's equipped to
mhm,
set those boundaries. There's a phrase that I do try to live by, which is before I insert myself into a conversation, the very first question I ask myself is what's my motive?
Mm.
What's my motive for joining in and either inserting my opinion, which by the way, it is your opinion,
mhm,
or or if what is it that I hope to gain, I guess, out of the whole conversation by participating. And if it's ego based, so you come in with it with a little bit of an ego and think like, well, I have a lot that I should share about this. And I've heard, because I've heard this a lot, I've heard I need to be an ally for people. And I need to stand up for these people. I need to stand up for somebody, the little guy. Okay, well, if you have not read anything about allyship and you just think being an ally is the new cool thing, you're going to put your foot in your mouth. I promise you. By the way, I've done it. I've done it.
same.
1,000% done it.
Mm,
Um, and thank God I've had people in my life, call me out or pull me aside. And I'm just now old enough to go, oh my gosh, that was an idiot move, like an idiot thing to say. And I apologize, own your part, etc. But that takes time. That takes
mhm,
time. And there's an emotional intelligence component to that. So I don't know, like I just think if you can't say something nice, don't say anything at all, but also know, like, give people some grace. Please give people some grace. I'm okay if people disagree with me. I'm okay with, if we don't have the same beliefs, oh my gosh, that actually be kind of cool. Might turn into a really cool conversation.
mhm,
But I think when you're in office, unless you're truly being invited into a conversation, I would just pause. I would just pause for a
Mm.
second and just ask yourself, what is my motive? Is my motive am I going to this with best intent, or is my ego leading? And your ego, by the way, I wrote an article about this saying your ego is not your amigo. Um, so true. It is so true. Your ego tells you things that are not true. Your ego goes, it's the judgment, it's the envy, it's the greed, it's I'm better than you. That's ego.
Mm.
That's all ego. And that's
Mhm.
completely false, by the way. That's completely false. But if
Yeah.
if those are little things that are popping up in your head, like I really want to insert myself because I want them to know who I am and I
Mm.
need them to listen to what I have to say. That's your ego.
I think what
Yeah.
really happened after George Floyd's murder was a lot of like the white fragility, right? Of like white people needing to prove to the world and especially our black employees that we're good people, we have good intentions, but
Mm.
also intention doesn't always equal impact, right? And so really, I like what you said in terms of like, if you don't need to be part of this conversation, like ask yourself what's your motive, but also don't feel like you need to always have an opinion about everything, right? And like coming from a place of humility, a curiosity, and listening, and then making up your mind, and also being okay to be corrected, right? Your whole notion of ego and don't take it personally. And I've been there too. I've gotten defensive, and just taking the ego out of it, I think, is so critical, especially as we go back to an office.
Share a very specific example with you in office. Okay, this is pre-pandemic. In office, and a gentleman is reporting to me. He is African American Black, and we got really close. We're still really good friends today. We just got to chatting just about him being a Black man. And I said, what's it like? Because I mean, I'm a white woman, and I mean, there's things like I get scared walking down the street by myself at night, right? That's I think that's a female, for me at least, that's a female thing. He was sharing with me in office, like when he's in office, he makes a concerted effort to smile more because as a Black man, when you don't smile, he has been told that he looks like he's angry.
Mm.
Mm.
And people have said that that makes him afraid. And I went,
Wow.
the
Mm.
what? Right? Like I would never in a million years have thought that. But you know what? Like, again, that's his lived experience. And I think that's where we as humans need to have an appreciation that unless I have walked in your shoes, I don't know. I don't know what it's like.
Mhm.
I can only speak about my experiences. And by the way, if I truly want to know what it's like for you, just ask. It
Yeah.
may or may not be appropriate to ask, which is, I mean, but I also had a different I had a relationship with this gentleman, right? And I was like, what is it like? And it was a very raw, open conversation around, just being who we are at work and things of that nature. I had somebody years ago, and when I say years, like 16 years ago, tell me, I just want you to be the authentic person you're meant to be, Joy. And I was like,
Mm.
I don't even know who that is. And I think with time and education, um, I've gotten a little bit closer to knowing who I am. So like when we ask people to go back to work and we're like, we just want you to be who you are and just come back to work and, be a part of and, bring your authentic self. Some people don't know what that is. And I think we have to be okay with that. We have to be okay with like, you know, maybe you need a copycat for a while, or maybe you need to just, be by yourself in the office. You come in and just be in your office for a while. That's okay.
Yeah, no, it is really sad, some of the experiences that people have.
Yeah.
All right, well, we are coming up on time here. It's been so refreshing what you shared, and so many good nuggets, and how people can really behave. And it was a good reminder for me too, if I ever go back into the office, sort of what's the etiquette, etc. Joy, though, in situations where you may have tried, we heard you say it's important to set boundaries, it's important to ask questions, it's important to ask your employer what you need. Let's say you've done all the things and it's just not working out, they're not willing to compromise. When is there a point in time where people should just walk away and seek other jobs? What's like that threshold in your opinion?
Everybody has their different pain thresholds, right? So, what my pain threshold might be different from somebody else. The very first question I always would ask somebody before they walk away is, again, have you done everything that you can to get to a solution? HR, I know some people are like, oh, I don't want to go to HR. Go to HR. Like I would go to HR and just talk. It's less about making a complaint and it's more around try to find a tangible solution to a problem that you're having. So that's why HR was created, by the way, right? So that's number one. And then if that doesn't work as well, if it's like, listen, we can't make those accommodations. Um, and then you go, okay, then you're faced with a decision. Stay under the, certain circumstances that you're in right now and know that it may or may not change. You've asked for what you needed. They've said no, and now you can stay or not. If you choose to start looking, and by the way, why wouldn't you keep looking?
Mm-hmm.
If it's like, I mean, keep the job. And I will tell you, my younger self would be like cringing in a corner right now about what I'm about ready to say, because my younger self would have been like, no, you like take that job and you are loyal. And if they
Mm.
made you that offer, you stay. And that's it. And if people come to you and ask you, like, do you want to look at this job? No. Like you made a commitment. Now, my almost 50-year-old self would be like, girl or boy, your person, listen, you are in charge of you. You pay your bills, you live your lifestyle. So, if this job right now is paying your bills and helping you live your lifestyle, thumbs up. But if it is not giving you what you have asked for, go look for other things and find
Mm-hmm.
it. It may take you a heck of a long time, especially in a layoff market. I wouldn't quit. For me personally, I wouldn't quit. This is me speaking for my personal self. If I was in a job and I asked for the flexibility and they said no, I wouldn't quit because I want the paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
I want the paycheck. But don't think for a second at night when I'm coming home, I'm going to be looking for a job.
Mhm.
And talking to people and trying to network and all that good stuff. Because there are employers out there that will accommodate what you ask for.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've gotten so wired just in this layoff market of fear, 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 fear. I got a
Mm.
job and I just gotta, I gotta do exactly what they tell me to do. Okay, I get that, right? You've got to pay your bills and nobody wants you to be homeless and not be able to get groceries and stuff like that. But at the same time, keep looking. Keep
Yeah.
looking,
Mhm.
just keep looking.
I I grew up and my parents always maybe it's a cultural thing, I don't know, but I feel like I'm Chinese American. My
Okay.
parents are very much like be humble when you have a job. Like, how lucky are you to have this wonderful job? And I recognize I am so lucky to have all the things that I have. It is not that I am not recognizing like the luck, the privilege that I have. But at the
Yes.
same time, now I'm at a place where I'm like, everybody should be looking. Like exactly to your point, whether
Mhm.
you have remote work or you have what you have or not, maybe you have everything you want in your current job. Keep looking.
And you should interview once a year, even if you have a gregreat job. It's just a
Yep.
Hmm.
muscle you should flex. So,
You always say yes to somebody presenting you an opportunity. Just talk to
mm.
them about it. Doesn't I mean, because these are not marriages. That's the other thing I think people need to really come to terms with. This is not a marriage. This is a job.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
again, my almost 50-year-old self, like I wish I knew this back when I was in my 20s, because Lord knows I would have made some different decisions. But again, you have to go through what you go through to get where you are. But yeah, like just keep looking. Keep looking.
Mhm.
It could also be like a generational thing. I feel like we see a lot of our like parents' generation to have
Yeah.
worked their entire life somewhere, and that's so normal. But also back in the days, there's like pension, like there's a lot of incentive for people to have stayed somewhere. Whereas nowadays, especially looking at like younger or even entry-level employees, like people are constantly jumping jobs, and that is so normal now. So we do have younger audience as well. So one of the things that as we were prepping for this interview, we thought it was just insane that there's probably a group of people out there who have only worked remote. Like they might have graduated school during the pandemic and have
Yeah.
only worked remotely, which is kind of crazy to think about. But for those people who are now maybe having to go to the office for the first time ever, what are things that you would recommend to them? Maybe it's tips around how to like leverage this for their career, like some of the in-person networking. Maybe it's how to like navigate office drama, because that's now a new
Mm.
thing for them. Like, what would you recommend to people who might be completely new to this office setting?
Well, the first thing I would do is I would highly recommend, if the company has employee resource groups or community groups or anything social that they
Hmm.
can plug into, 1,000%. I would be all over that. I would be
Mhm.
like if I was going back into office for the very first time, never ever worked in an office, that would be my lifeline. Right. So that'd be number one. Number two is that this is gonna sound super hokey, but I don't care. I'm gonna say it. Decorate your desk. Bring some stuff that's like, this is my space.
Hmm.
There's something comforting about that. There's something welcoming. You're like, that's my office, that's my space. Simple things like, making sure you show up on time, making sure you
Mm.
participate actively in the job that you were hired to do. Don't just be a bump on a log. Um, Seriously, I mean, like I've back in the day when going in the office was a totally normal thing, there were people that we hired and I was like, dude, are you here? Right?
Right.
But don't be a bump on the log. Actively participate in what's happening in the organization. Office drama is gonna happen. I'm
Hmm.
just here
Hmm.
to tell you it is going to happen. How you choose to react to that office drama that's more about you than it is about the other people. Um, I will give this is advice from somebody who has, gone around the corporate in office tree a couple times. Do not gossip. If you choose to gossip, make sure what you're saying about the other person, you would absolutely say to their face. Don't do it. Like it's not worth it. And it'll damage your reputation and your career faster than anything.
Joy. It's been such a joy to have you on. No, seriously though, thank you. This has been incredible, tangible advice, and I took a lot of notes. But my favorite quote, I think, is, and I'm gonna keep that in mind: listening to reflect versus listening to
Mhm.
respond. I'm very quick to just want to insert myself, so I'm gonna keep that in mind. Before we let you go, one burning question I have, and it's been on everyone's mind, slightly off
Oh,
topic, but still work related, given your position and how you work with candidates, you work with employers right now. What are your predictions for 2024? We just had this massive layoff wave, right? And are we in the clear? What are you hearing on the ground? What are some of your predictions for 2024 in terms of jobs, layoffs, remote jobs, etc.?
okay. So remote jobs are going to remain somewhat stagnant. So I think what we're seeing is what we're seeing. That this is my prediction.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see, I think, anywhere between 10 to 20% of overall jobs still be remote. We will continue to see an increase in hybrid. And I mean, again, Jane, you said it earlier. It's like, let's get real. It's in office, right? It's just
Yeah.
it's just the number of days that they're asking you to go back in office. So we're going to see
Mm-hmm.
a larger percentage of organizations go back towards that. In addition to that, it is going to be a significant gig economy. Let me tell you what I mean by that. We're going to see a lot more organizations farm out work for contractual projects, much more so than we will see them say, "Hey, we're going to hire you and pay the full-time benefits and do all this stuff, and then when we lay you off, we're going to have to pay a severance package and all that stuff." We're going to see a stronger gig economy, so much more contracting, project-based work, etc. If you do not have an LLC, I would highly recommend setting yourself up as an LLC so you can be a 1099 contractor for anybody that asks. So that is for sure, like right now I would do that. Um, and then last but not least, what I think we are going to see is we're going to see a lot more startup companies coming into play. Here's why. Last year and a half, last 18 months, we've seen a lot of layoffs within larger tech organizations, and they paid out an exorbitant amount of money to individuals that are wickedly smart. We're already starting to see AI come on the scene, And we're going to see more of that, but they're going to start to do things with this AI technology on the back end and start making front end products. And then we're going to start to see sales roles being created. And then when you get sales, then you create the infrastructure and then so on and so forth. So startup companies are for sure going to surge in 2024. And then the larger tech organizations, they're going to remain somewhat flat. I don't think we're going to see big surges of hiring. There's still going to be hiring happening because they're still going to get added headcount, but we're not going to see like surges of things unless there is some unbelievable product that these companies decide to push out that requires a significant amount of infrastructure support. But I don't anticipate that because Microsoft has already bought, OpenAI, and LinkedIn. So those are my predictions. That's what I think is going to happen.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing.
Thank you.
And thank you for spending time with us. So yeah, before we let you go, please let our audience know any projects you're working on. Would love, please plug away your incredible business that you launched.
So I run a firm called Your Network Now. It is a specialized firm for talent acquisition professionals. What we do is we run job seeker cohort programs, and they run for 12 weeks in length. And it is a maximum of 10 peers per cohort. And it is an intensive program with the objective of landing you a job by the end of the 12 weeks. In addition to that, what's coming soon, and we're hoping to be able to kick this off and get it off the ground in March. I might be a little aggressive in my timeline here, but we'll see, is our consulting division. And our consulting division is going to be project-based work for organizations that are looking for micro recruiting and sourcing projects. And so we will have a consulting bench of talent acquisition professionals, and then we'll match those professionals up to projects and then let them work on projects and get paid.
Wow, that's super exciting.
Yeah, it's good
So
stuff.
happy to watch, and continue to watch along what you're doing and see your business thrive.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you, Joy, again. And to our listeners, thank you for being here with us. As always, we would love to hear your reactions. If any of this piqued your interest, what's been your experience with return to office or remote work? Also, if you want to get in touch with Joy, we'll put everything into our thumbnail and on our socials. And you can reach us at where'sthelinepod@gmail.com. Please rate, review, subscribe on Apple or Spotify or Google or wherever you listen.
Bye.